Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into the gritty, totally unforgiving world of the Grim Shadows universe. We're doing an anthropological deep dive into one of its absolute most formidable and honestly fascinating peoples, the Orcs of Tanelon. We're going to strip away all those tired myths and really examine the raw, brutal, and surprisingly structured reality of these warrior tribes. Orc honor was never built to provide human comfort. I absolutely love that quote. It perfectly sets the stage for what we're looking at today. You really have to toss out that generic, mindless monster stereotype you might be used to seeing in other fantasy settings. The Orcs of Tanelon, they possess a fiercely pragmatic culture. Their morality isn't based on human ideas of mercy. It's based entirely on power, obligation, courage, and just the sheer will to survive in a hostile world. It's a culture built from the ground up around strength. And I don't just mean the strength to swing a sword, but the endurance to march for days, protect a herd, and hold ground when literally everyone else would retreat.
Okay, let's dive into this with part 1. A people without a nation.
To truly understand the orcs, we really have to grasp just how decentralized their reality actually is. If you were to ask a human living in some walled city in Tanelon, they'd probably picture this massive, unified, evil empire just waiting to strike. But the reality? The orcs are completely scattered. There is no orc kingdom, there is no single orc king, or some permanent ruling council sitting around a big table. They are divided among hundreds of independent tribes, bands, and mercenary companies. They're bound together only by highly practical, totally temporary alliances. Say a group of tribes unite to fight off a human invasion or a monster migration. Well, the absolute second that shared enemy is defeated, that alliance dissolves. Poof, gone. Half the time they start arguing over the captured loot before the dead are even buried. So making an agreement with one orc warlord absolutely does not guarantee safe passage from the very next tribe you run into on the road.
And honestly, the sheer distance and geography of Tanelon make any kind of unity impossible anyway. Take the Badlands, for instance. Here, orcs hold these treacherous mountain passes and ruined keeps, just constantly clashing with bandit princes and necromancers. Then you look over at the Wild Coast, where they're battling harsh tides, sea raiders, and imperial patrols. Sometimes they're fighting them, and sometimes they're actually taking their coin as mercenaries. Meanwhile, out on the vast Great Plains, you have these massive nomadic tribes fighting generations-long grazing wars against human barbarians and the dragon lords over, simple survival stuff like grass and water. So the geography totally dictates their survival tactics and determines exactly who they view as a rival on any given day.
Now, because of these vastly different environments, two very distinct ways of life have popped up. On one side, you have the nomadic tribes. For these guys, a slow camp is a dead camp. Their wealth is entirely mobile. We're talking livestock, weapons, tools, you name it. On the flip side, you have the stronghold tribes. These are the orcs holding down mountain keeps or walled villages. They build up heavy armor, siege tools, and support metalworkers. But by doing that, they become fixed targets. As you might guess, these two groups constantly talk trash about each other's lifestyles. The nomads mock the static, trapped nature of the strongholds, and the stronghold orcs look down on the wandering herdsmen like they're uncultured. But despite all this friction, they will absolutely unite in a heartbeat out of sheer pragmatism when a major external threat shows up. Let's move on to part 2, the religion of war.
So if they are this divided by geography and how they live, what's the central philosophical glue keeping this whole thing together? Well, it all comes down to their shared faith, the religion of war. Now, this is absolutely crucial to understand. This isn't a religion of fancy temples, universal gods, holy books, or single priesthoods. War itself is the force that proves worth and exposes lies. The battlefield, the challenge ground, the forge, the stronghold gate, these are their sacred spaces. And it's not just about, swinging an axe every hour of the day. A smith forging heavy armor, or a herder keeping animals alive during a brutal winter retreat, they are serving the religion of war just as a champion breaking an enemy line. Defeat isn't necessarily a disgrace, as long as you fought with courage and honor. But cowardice, breaking an oath, abandoning your duty, or claiming a strength you refuse to prove, that is the only true sin.
To survive this completely relentless worldview, orcs are literally built for battle. I mean, picture facing an adversary who stands 7 feet tall, heavily muscled, and has dark vision. That means they can march all night and launch these devastating dawn attacks without ever needing to swap out troops. But their greatest biological advantage, for sure, is their extreme endurance. An orc war party can run for an entire day and completely exhaust fleeing enemies. It's terrifying. Tactically, they lean right into this. They'll hurl javelins and heavy throwing axes to close the distance super fast, and then they finish the fight with massive great blades, hammers, and axes that are specifically designed to just shatter human armor and shields.
And they do all of this wrapped in heavy metal plates and layered mail that is quite literally built to be struck and repaired over and over again. Now, while most orcs prefer fighting on foot, we have to talk about the great boars. Some tribes breed these as steeds, and guys, these aren't just big pigs. They are absolutely terrifying, aggressive beasts that can charge across broken ground and smash straight into a formation. They'll shrug off injuries that would instantly drop a normal warhorse, but they are incredibly dangerous to ride. An inexperienced rider is just as likely to be thrown off or completely crushed by their own mount before they even reach the enemy line.
Let's transition over to part 3, Warlords and the Challenge. Let's look at how these massive, heavily armed warriors are actually led, because their internal laws of succession are harsh and completely rigid. Every tribe is led by a warlord, but that title is never safe. If a warlord fails to protect the herds, loses too many warriors, or hoards an unfair share of the plunder, any recognized member of the tribe can step up and initiate a lawful challenge. This is a public, one-on-one fight to the death. And the absolute most important rule in this brutal legal system, literally, no magic is allowed. The entire purpose of the challenge is to prove, right there in front of the whole tribe, that the challenger is physically and practically stronger than the current leader. If anyone interferes, or if even a hint of magic is suspected, the victory is totally rejected, and the offender is killed on the spot. True power has to be proven publicly. You can't just inherit it or steal it through magical trickery.
Which leads us perfectly into part 4. Magic, superstition, and advisors.
That strict ban on magic during a challenge actually exposes a massive vulnerability in orc culture, and how they practically manage it is super interesting. Orcs have this deep, ingrained distrust of casting spells. In their eyes, magic is just a cheat code. It allows the physically weak to cheat the strong, totally undermining their core belief that might makes right. But, and this is key, their distrust does not mean disbelief. They know magic is very real, which makes them highly, highly superstitious. They are terrified of curses, omens, unnatural weather, and marked ground. If a clever enemy figures out a specific tribe's superstitions, they can use false signs or staged hauntings to completely redirect an entire orc war party without even drawing a sword.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the orcs solve this problem. They use a very deliberate division of power. Because superstition without knowledge is incredibly dangerous, every established warlord keeps an advisor, usually a mage, a witch, or a warlock. The advisor's job is to read the omens, figure out which curses are real and which are fake, and treat unnatural wounds. They are kept close for protection and they are respected, but they are watched with a deep, deep suspicion. The warlord commands the tribe with physical strength. The advisor handles the supernatural stuff. But the advisor is strictly forbidden from ever taking the title of warlord. It's a classic check and balance, orc style. Let's zoom out a bit for part 5, the business of battle.
So how do these fiercely independent, superstitious warrior tribes actually interact with the rest of the world of Tanelon? Well, it's incredibly varied and, true to form, entirely pragmatic. For a lot of tribes, brutal raids on human settlements are just a sheer survival necessity. It's how they gather resources, animals, and captives for labor. This also leads to a generation of highly intelligent but deeply distrusted half-orcs who end up caught between two worlds. But raiding definitely isn't the only path. Tons of orcs leave their tribal lands to serve as highly prized shock combat mercenaries in the Dreaming Empire. They are incredibly valued for their ability to fight in heavy armor and just tirelessly pursue enemies. You'll also see them all over the realm serving as these imposing bodyguards for corrupt merchants, bandit princes, and cult leaders. And this brilliantly illustrates a core tenet of orc morality that a lot of people misunderstand. When an orc acts as a bodyguard for an evil ruler, they aren't necessarily endorsing that ruler's beliefs. To them, it's a war bargain. They get payment in status in exchange for taking on the physical danger that was meant for their employer. As long as the terms are respected, an orc will loyally fight to the death to honor that oath, because breaking it would shame them before the religion of war. They protect power. But, and this is a big but, if an employer refuses to pay or tries to cheat them with magic, well, they're going to quickly discover that fear is not loyalty. Orcs do not protect fraud.
So looking at the big picture, from the Badlands all the way out to the Great Plains, whether they're nomadic herders, stronghold defenders, or imperial mercenaries, the Orcs of Tanelon are a people defined by struggle, unmatched endurance, and unyielding pragmatism. They absolutely are not mindless monsters. They're a complex culture constantly asking who has the grit to hold the land, keep the oath, and survive the march. It's such a brilliantly designed piece of the Grim Shadows universe, and it leaves us with a final thought to ponder today. When the religion of war tests you, will you have the strength to stand? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring the lore.